After a pretty fantastic 9 days of racing, the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift has come to an end, and Demi Vollering is the winner. And of course, just like the men's race, this video is a tier list rating every team that competed in the race, from DNS, they might as well have not been here, to S tier, the best of the best. But I do want to preface this video by saying that there is a difference with the men's race in the sense that there are less stages, 9 instead of 21, so it's much harder for a small team like Volker Wessels to show themselves in the same way that a small team in the men's race would do, because there'd be more breakaways. That said, as always, my ratings are based on my expectations before the race, so completely subjective. But okay, it's time to begin, and I'd like to do so with a team that was very dominant in last year's race, AG Insurance Soudal. And of course, last year their team was a bit stronger with Sarah Gigante as a GC rider, but she's still injured, so it's all about Kim Pinard. And well, my expectations before the race for KLCP were a stage win and a potential top 10 in GC, and that's kind of exactly what happened, so that's nice. But I do have to confess that I did expect a little bit more from some other riders in the team, like Justine Hikiro, who was more of a domestique in this race and not really able to get in breakaways and be relevant that way. B tier is my score for AG Insurance Soudal. But I'm afraid I can't be that nice for our next team, Picnic PostNL. I feel like the story of the women's Picnic team is very similar to the story of the men's team of Picnic because they're a shade of their former self. If we take a look at a couple years ago, they had Wiebes, Kool, Koch, and sure, they've still got quality in the likes of Pfeiffer Georgie, but she didn't really perform in this race. And I know that some of the riders in this team are simply happy to finish this race in the first place as an objective, but they were basically invisible, so I have to rate them badly. At the entire bottom of our ranking, DNS for Picnic PostNL, they might as well have not been here. Our next team is the complete opposite story, UnoX Mobility, who overperformed by quite a bit. Honestly, when this race started, I expected UnoX Mobility, just like half the rest of the teams, to be not NPCs, but a team that has to let the race happen to them, but that's not the case here. And of course, you and I both know I'm talking about stage 3, where halfway the stage a group of roughly 8 to 10 riders was off the front for a bit, not exactly cooperating, but a single rider in that group thought to himself, I'm gonna try and get something out of this. It was indeed Sigrid Hauksrud of UnoX who made that move and gained significant time, up to 4 minutes 30, because the peloton was looking at each other, which is not her problem. Lotte Kopecky was the sole chaser, she couldn't close the gap, and Hauksrud wins the Tour de France stage, not just winning the stage, but also taking yellow for the day. And like I said at the start of this video, my ratings are compared to expectations, and this outcome, a stage win and a yellow jersey, is a dream scenario for a team like UnoX with a pretty limited budget for a World Tour team. Yes, I'm giving UnoX an S tier rating for their Tour de France Femmes, the first team at the top of our ranking. Our next team I kind of expected more of, Liv Alula-Jaco. Like sure, their leader abandoned I think on stage 6 due to illness, but the rest of the team also was not as visible as I was hoping for, but at least they were present in a couple of breakaways with the likes of Ruby Rose Manganen. I'm afraid it's D tier for this team, visible but not good. But okay, I think our next team, Little Trek, is gonna be a bit controversial because I'm actually still struggling myself to figure out where I'll rate them at the end of this rant. Like, I think everyone who follows women's cycling properly knows that Isabella Holmgren is a massive talent when it comes to GC, and she showed that once again with a nice 8th place in this race. But while it's completely expected for Niamh Fisher-Black to lose plenty of time on a time trial, she lost like 10 minutes on Mont Ventoux, which getting 14th place there is disappointing. If we look beyond the GC riders, then in their sprinting department, Balsamo finished second on the only proper sprint stage in this race, so you can't be expecting too much more than that against Lorena Wiebes. But ironically, I think the highlight for this team is a rider that did not achieve their goal in this race, which is Rianne Marcus, who was in the attack so many times, including in stage 3, where she was the hedge your bets pick to go in the breakaway while Balsamo could sprint from the peloton, and I do like that strategy. And also on the stage win of Kim Pinard, she was the rider that bridged with Pinard to the front and then later attacked the group in the last 2 kilometers. Marcus was the MVP of this team. I was gonna give this team C tier, but I think I've changed my mind. I'm going for B tier, for Little Trek. If we talk about human-powered health, then we have to talk about their best rider, which is Thalita de Jong. After a pretty fantastic Tour de France Femmes back in 2024, getting, I think, 10th place in GC, she transferred to human-powered health, and last year was a bit of a disappointment, but this year she's kind of back with a nice 13th place. And sure, the team went in a couple of breakaways with Rijmakers and Cipressi, but if you want to get something out of those breakaways, then you have to go in the break with your best riders, like, for example, Buisman, who finished 16th in GC. You can't tell me that if she goes in the break on day one that you don't have a chance of getting the QM jersey for a day. I feel like I'm left a bit hungry, so D tier for human-powered health. Now, I think Movistar is actually really complicated to rate, especially knowing the outcome of the race for Marlen Reusser, but let's jump in. Firstly, my expectation for Reusser in this race was winning the individual time trial, getting the yellow jersey for a couple days, and fighting for a top 5 in GC, and that's kind of what was happening. If anything, she was doing better than that, fighting for the podium up to the last day. So yeah, at that point I'm thinking Movistar is gonna be an A-tier team in my tier list after this race ends, but then Reusser starts dropping halfway the final stage, which I think if she didn't crash, she most likely loses her podium anyway, so she would finish in that pre-race expectation top 5, but then the crash takes her completely out of it. But okay, putting Reusser to the side, I do think the team properly came around her as domestiques in this race, with Ostis being really good in the final weekend and Liana Lippert being an underrated domestique across the entire race. Now ratings-wise, it hurts to say this because my heart wants to put them higher, but I think it's B tier for Movistar. So far I've had a pretty difficult time rating these teams, and I think Fenix Premier Tech, our next team, is also pretty tough. And I think part of why it's so difficult is because most of this team outside of Pieterse were basically invisible, and half of the stuff that Pieterse did happened off camera before the broadcast began. I do want to give the team quite a bit of credit for the way they hunted that QM jersey, basically going in the break or fighting at QM points on a daily basis. But I personally struggle to put the prestige of this QM jersey in what is a, let's be honest, 9-day stage race on the same level of a stage win in this race, which to me is much more valuable. And while Pieterse did come close twice to a stage win, the rest of the team was basically uncompetitive, including Charlotte Kool, who couldn't even finish in the top 100. I think some of you will disagree with me because you rate the QM jersey higher, but I can't put them in B tier, so it is C tier for Fenix Premier Tech for me. But I now kind of want to go over some smaller teams in this race, and I do struggle to rate them accurately because of what I said at the start of this video. There's only 9 stages, so it's much harder to be represented in every breakaway. For example, if we take a look at Cofidis, then Nikola Noskova comes to mind as the rider that was in the breakaway on stage 1 fighting for QM points, but she didn't get anything out of the race, and the rest of the team was basically invisible. But I started with no expectations to begin with, so it's hard to put them in DNS then. I'll go with D tier for Cofidis in this race. But I think I might rate our next team Lotto worse, because while I do believe Sandrine Tas is super talented and got a top 20 I think in the individual time trial, the rest of the team was a bit of a disaster class. I have to assume there was some sickness or crashes for this team, because on day 2, 3 of their riders abandoned the race and 2 more of their riders just made the time limit by a little bit after sheltering behind the vehicle and being punished for it. I'm giving a DNS rating to Lotto. They might as well have not started. Our next team, Volker Wessels, was present in the race, in breakaways and also in stage 1 I think, in a notable move with Eline Janssen, but I kind of expected more from them. And talking about Eline Janssen, I think she's a super talented rider, and her Tour de France last year was simply better than this year. I think I have to give D tier for Volker Wessels in this race. And I think I might be more disappointed in Laboral Kucha, who's a better team than Volker Wessels. Like, if we simply take a look at their best rider, Ostolaza, she had a fantastic run in the Spanish races earlier this year with, I think, a 4th place at the Vuelta, maybe a podium at Burgos, and 7th place at Itzulia. So that's a super strong list of results in 3 World Tour stage races. And of course, you can't be at your best the whole season, but I'm rating the Tour de France Femmes, so she only got a 4th place on a stage 3 versatile sprint, so it's impossible to rate this team high, even though they were in a few breakaways. I was considering giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I don't think I will. DNS for Laboral Kucha. They might as well have not started. Saint-Michel was also quite disappointing compared to what I expected from them, because they also have a rider that should be able to do better, Alison Jackson. And well, in this Tour de France Femmes, the only moment where I saw her was in a Chasse Patate, maybe on stage 1? I'm sorry, but it's DNS for Saint-Michel. They might as well have not started. And actually, I think I might skip rating a team like Mayenne Mombana Mappeit, because that's such a small team with a tiny budget and tiny resources, to the point that what are my expectations for a team like this before the race starts? I kind of expect to just not see them. But actually, I think I did see them trying to attack on multiple stages with Chiara Lilac on stage 1, Fiona Mangan on a different stage, maybe a Van 2 stage, not completely sure. I'll go with D tier for Mayen Mombana Mappeit. What a mouthful of a name, by the way. But okay, I think my next rating is gonna be pretty controversial because this team, Mappeit Entreprise, most of you had never heard of that before this race began. So if our baseline expectation for this team is to not be relevant in the race and they go in the breakaway on day 1 and take the QOM jersey with Ocean Mahé, that is a fantastic result for the team. And this tiny team was present in most of the bigger breakaways in this race, whether it is with Mahé on stage 1, or Lemuel, or Latime on the Van 2 stage, where she was actively trying to be the final rider up the road from the breakaway. It's making our board look pretty weird, but it's A tier from Mappeit Entreprise. I think one of my personal favorite teams might be EF Education Oatly. On one end, Cédrine Kerbal, their GC rider, managed to get a top 10 in this race for the 3rd time in a row, 6th, 8th, and now 6th again. I also love the versatility of Noemi Rook, 5 top 10s in this race across multiple terrain types, including being super strong on Van 2. The one thing I'm missing for this team is a stage win, so B tier is my score. Anyway, it's time to go back to the big teams, and the first of the 5 here is this D-Works Pro Time, and I think it's fair to say their Tour de France was pretty successful. Or actually, I'm not sure I agree with myself, because Lorena Wiebes obviously won stage 1 and stage 2, took the yellow jersey for a couple days and dominated the green jersey. But I think you and I both agree that 2 of their riders disappointed. Lotte Kopecky can be way more competitive at her best level than she was in this race, and Anna van der Breggen looked like she was basically over-raced going into this race, and she fell off pretty quickly when it comes to her level. And based on the season so far, you would expect Wiebes to be competitive for multiple stages here, and on top of that, Van der Breggen also be competitive for a top 5, and they don't get both here. I was planning to give them A tier because 2 stages and green, but I think they could have done better, so I think I'm going for B tier, which might be harsh. But okay, our next team was Drama Central going into this race. UAE team Limad had leadership issues in the first couple of days, and that's because the management decided that they would start with 2 co-leaders instead of 3, Flodarczyk and Longoborghini, and not Blasi, who literally won the Vuelta. Either way, drama to the side. I said before the race that the road would decide, and it did. At the end of this race, they finished with 3 leaders in the top 10, with Elisa Longoborghini in 3rd place, Blasi in 5th place but not winning the white jersey, and Vlodarczyk in 7th place. And despite not winning a stage, I do think a podium in GC is above my initial expectation. I've got A tier for UAE Team Limad. Honestly, I'm looking at this board and I've got a feeling this is going to be a really controversial video. On to our 3rd last team then, Visma Leasebike, who won the race last year with Pauline Ferrand-Prevot, the co-favorite for this edition. But already in the first couple of stages we saw signs that Pauline Ferrand-Prevot was dropping in moments that she shouldn't be dropping. That followed by a pretty terrible time trial, and a couple days later, she was completely out of GC. And if we put GC to the side and look at the sprints, then Marianne Vos is the go-to person, but the results are not there because she was near invisible. I do want to give some credit to Lieke Nooyen with a fantastic 2nd place in the time trial, and Femke de Vries with a proper climbing level throughout the entire race. But while 2023 was also pretty bad, this year was undoubtedly the worst Tour de France Femmes for Visma Leasebike ever. I'm sorry, but it's D tier for Visma Leasebike. A proper failure. But okay, now it's time to talk about the most relevant 2 teams in this race, starting off with Canyon-SRAM and Kasia Niewiadoma. Honestly, before the race began, I was expecting competitiveness for the podium from Kasia Niewiadoma, and I expected it to be more difficult than previous years because the competition for the podium was more significant this year. But on the time trial, a discipline that doesn't exactly fit her, she had a fantastic result, and I said to myself, okay, this podium is a lock. And of course, you and I both know what happened on the big climb of this race, Mont Ventoux. She won the stage after dropping the biggest climbing performance in recorded women's cycling history. I'm sorry, but that was insane. But of course, Demi Vollering is no pancake, so she fought back in doing so, dropping Kasia Niewiadoma out of the yellow jersey. That said, of course, an A-tier Tour de France for Canyon-SRAM and Kasia Niewiadoma. And that brings us to the final team of today's video, the team of the winner, Demi Vollering, FDJ Suisse. Like sure, Demi Vollering was my favorite going into the race, but winning a Tour de France is not simple, so to pull it off after being in a losing position after Mont Ventoux, that takes strength, both physically and mentally. That said, I do think the teammates were a bit of a roller coaster with a rather disappointing Music, Koch having a bad day on day 1 and then getting better throughout the race, Bertet being a bit disappointing early on but then striking well on the final day, Celia Jarry probably being the best domestique in this race, or at least in the team. So while it wasn't a picture-perfect race for the team worked so well together, and they got 3 stage wins and the yellow jersey, so I don't think there's anything to complain. So it's not enough to drop them down to A tier for me. In the end, I think it's a well-deserved victory for Demi Vollering, who's been struggling to get this second win at the Tour de France ever since she won it the first time around in 2023. So yeah, a yellow jersey, proper teamwork, and 3 stage wins, that can only mean one thing. S tier for FDJ Suisse and Demi Vollering. And of course, that makes this our final tier list. Which means it's now your turn. Go to the comment section below and tell me what you agree or disagree with. Because your take matters just as much as mine. Anyway, that was a pretty fantastic race, and I'm actually gonna miss it.